Welcome to Zoom. This event is called Does Ethics Matter in Science and Technology? I'm Professor Laura Templeman. I teach philosophy and world religions. I'm a member of Diversity Council, which is the group that's sponsoring tonight's event. And I would like to thank you all for attending via Zoom. It's our new norm, but I do hope by this fall, we will be back in the Lake Coeur d'Alene room, filling it up again. So fingers crossed. I'd like to thank Steve, our tech moderator, and always the local Coeur d'Alene Dharma friends, and everyone at the Abbey who has helped me to put this together. In tonight's talk, Venerable Chödrön will explore how understanding the ethics of non-harming can help us engage with science and technology in ways that are good for us and good for society. Venerable Chödrön, as always, I look forward to your talk. And I will turn things over to you. And while everyone's muted, I will clap for them.
Okay. Yeah, it's very good to be here with all of you again. Again, this is the third talk I think I've given to NIC on Zoom. So we're getting used to it. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity really to address all of you. I see a lot of old friends and even a relative and then some of your students, Laura. So thank you so much for organizing this. So today we're talking about ethics in science and technology, which is a huge, huge topic. And what I wish we could do is do it more in the form of a discussion, but this format doesn't allow so much for it. But at the end, we'll have some time for questions and maybe answers, because I'm sure what I say will, trigger some things. You may agree, you may disagree. And then let's set our motivation and things that we will listen and share together this evening so that we can increase our wisdom in how to relate ethical conduct to all the different facets of our life, especially science and technology, and how to bring compassion into our motivation and into our relationship with technology and science. So with that as a motivation, then open your eyes and we'll begin. So I think that ethical conduct and compassion go very much together, hand in hand, and that these two things apply to every facet of our life. Okay, I don't see ethical conduct and compassion as just spiritual qualities that you develop or a spiritual perspective on things. I see those two as integral to living a happy life in which we feel good about what we do and in which we approach life and your career, family, all aspects of life with awareness, with intention, not just operating on automatic, not just adopting other people's principles and values, but really living in a very aware way and being very clear with ourselves about what is important and what we want to do and what actions we don't want to engage in. Yeah, so that entails really some thoughtfulness and setting a time setting apart time in our life to really think about what we believe in and what our values are. Yeah, because it's so easy just to get caught up in the usual way of doing things and societal values. And our main societal value, yeah, I would say, is money, making money. And money is a sign of success, a sign of intelligence. People feel powerful when they have it. It's a way to attract people to you. It's a way to pressure people to do what you want. And so money is quite important, and it's very much linked, with having power and power over other people, power in your particular field, okay, linked with reputation, yeah, looking good, being well known, being well respected, okay? So often we sacrifice our ethical conduct in order to get money and all those things that I just said money signifies and stimulates. So we may have different principles, but then the bottom line comes out as money. So one of our trainees at the Abbey just came from Silicon Valley, and she was very successful, worked at several companies there, making a lot of money, very good at what she was doing, well respected. And so we were talking this morning, and I was asking people in terms of preparing for this talk, and she was saying that the people in all the startups and the people who just began the internet and all of that thought what they were doing was something really wonderful to connect people in the world who normally would not be connected. Yeah. And I think that really was, how it began, of like, wow, look what we can do. People from one country, can talk to people from another country, and we can share ideas, and we can really come together as a global community. And there was a lot of excitement about that. And Facebook was really the emblem of bringing all these people together. She was saying that the bottom line is always money. Yeah. And so as the tech companies grew, it was really, there was still, the wonderful excitement about their motivation, but it was also, well, now we have rivals. How can we get more people to click on our website? Yeah. And so she was telling me that one of her principal jobs was to get people to click more, on the website of the company that she was working for. I can't remember which one it was. And so then it was, quantity based, and it becomes manipulation. Yeah. When you want more people to click on your site so that you can make more money and have a better reputation, then you have to do all sorts of gimmicks and whatever, and the whole thing with algorithms to give people what they want to hear or what they want to see. And it becomes a form of manipulating other people's minds. And then at that point, how much do people, are they still in touch with their initial motivation? And how much has the motivation shifted to something else. Yeah. So I don't know in tech companies how much they sit and talk about this. I've given a couple of talks at Google. It was very strange talking at Google. The first talk I gave, huge auditorium, just a few people in the auditorium. Most of them were at their desks watching online. The second talk I gave, there was just the person organizing the talk and the people who took me there in the room. Everybody else was at their desk because they don't get a very long lunch break. And I felt so weird. I was like talking to these people that I can't even see. And when you give a talk, the reaction of the audience is so important to you as a speaker. Yeah, which is why I asked Laura asked all of you to turn on your cameras, because, when I can see you and see how you're reacting to things, it changes, it influences how I speak. Thank you, everybody, for turning on. I'm glad you're listening. You're not, falling asleep already. So it really makes me think. And I watched a movie, a documentary, which I recommend to you. It's called Social Dilemma. And in it are some of the people who started the internet and all these kinds of things, and how they're saying what their initial motivation was and how it has spun out of control for them. They may still be the leaders of the companies and have a lot of influence, but the whole thing now is much bigger than it went in directions that they never intended or never even thought about. So this is another thing, when especially as Americans, we love new things. Yeah, we always have to have more and better, and we're creative, and this whole American thing of we're going to come up with the best of everything. Okay. And, it leaves you in a strange place as a human being. So, the people who started the internet never really sat down and thought about what it could develop into. There was, and this was what they said themselves in the Social Dilemma, that they were just so taken up with this idea of we're inventing something new that is going to transform the world. And what was it Steve Jobs said? Make a dent in the universe, so that we will be remembered and we will influence generations of people to come. But they didn't always think of how they would influence generations and what would the result be. And so here we are, looking at the political landscape in the country where people can't even settle on the same facts. And, when I was young, some of you are my age, you remember Walter Cronkite? We sat at 6:00, watched the Walter Cronkite news. Everybody got the same story. Now, people don't even get the same story. And then you have, alternative facts, which I find an extremely interesting idea. Okay, you can just switch your facts out for whatever you believe and say what the other person said was wrong. And the whole spread of misinformation and plain out lies. Yeah. So all the conspiracy theorists QAnon and Alex Jones and all these kinds of people, and then how that is bleeding into the government, especially the previous administration. And even now, now too, just how politicians do things. And the truth is kind of like an incidental thing that may or may not be important, but what has become more important with technology is getting people to click on your side, donate money to your political whatever it is, okay? Or donate money to your cause. And many of these causes are good, I'm not knocking that. Yeah, but the spread of misinformation and the use of the internet now to trick people and deceive people is something that the people who invented it never even thought about. Yeah. So when we talk about ethics in technology, to me, ethics means that when you start something, you think long term. You don't just think about what's going to happen immediately and how I can make money and be famous and influence people. But long term, if you want to make a dent in the universe, make a beautiful dent that's going to create human happiness. Yeah, don't make an ugly dent that is going to bring about deception and destroy democracy. Okay, because I think technology, has the power now to destroy democracy. So, it's the whole idea of getting people to slow down, think about what they're doing in advance. And to me, that is ethical conduct, because you want to see how is what I'm inventing or what I'm doing or publicizing, is it going to create conflict among people, and even start wars? Is it going to increase people's greed so that they will deceive more people? Maybe they may not break into somebody's house and rob it because of the internet, but you have all the white collar theft and extortion, okay? So think about that, how what you're inventing is going to influence that. The spread of pornography on the internet and young children, yeah, they're having pictures taken of them having sexual relationships with adults posted on the internet. And then some of these young people grow up and the pictures of them as kids still being abused and exploited is still on the internet, and they live with that shadow. Did the people think about that kind of thing happening and how it influences people? Okay, how lies and misinformation can take shape. Yeah, especially we see it very much with the COVID. What's happening with COVID? Again, so many alternative facts that people don't even know who to believe or what to believe anymore. Okay, so we need to stop and think about how our things are going to be used. Yeah, and to think, with compassion, about, are these things really going to help human beings be happier, be more peaceful? Yeah, you can make a lot of money and getting people riled up and ready to fight, but is that really how you want to use your skill? Or do you want to use your skill to create some, imbue ethical conduct and compassion in with the technology that you're developing? Okay, the same thing goes for artificial intelligence. People are so, the tech people are so excited about artificial intelligence, and we can get people, machines to respond like human beings. And so there's this whole thing of like excitement about we can invent something new. Imagine a machine that can talk like a human being. And so we've had movies where people have fallen in love with computers, you know. Uh, that's not so good. And also with artificial intelligence and the thing with facial recognition, how there's so many things about racism imbued in that. And that's, they're saying that the facial recognition that's been developed doesn't work so well on minority people, and they can easily be misunderstood. And then if the police is using it, they can be arrested for crimes they did not commit. Okay. So, but do people think about how their inventions can be misused? Or is there just so much excitement about developing something new that we tune out to the ramifications? Yeah. And so this is where I think, ethical conduct comes in, and it's so important. And I really think that in all the school, all the departments of education in university, community colleges, and so on, whatever students are learning, there should also be an ethics class, as a part of the program, to get the kids thinking about this. Laura, you think that's a good idea, huh? Good. Yeah. So that people think about these things. Yeah. Because otherwise, artificial intelligence can be so dangerous. And I also find it very sad. I hear of cases of people who are suicidal, and, they say to Siri, Siri, I'm thinking about killing myself. And now Siri is programmed to talk to them and say, oh, please don't do that. Please call this phone number, And so, okay, you can say in one way that's good. Siri might give them some good information. But isn't it kind of a sad thing that people are so glued to their screens and their reality has become this big, that they listen to Siri and confide in Siri instead of in a loved one or a friend? Yeah, I find that very, very sad. I remember reading one article of a couple who met on the internet, and they were doing everything, online because they lived in different parts of the world, and they fell in love, and it was wonderful, and da. And then they agreed to meet in person. But when they met in person, they felt like they couldn't talk to each other. So one went in one room, one went in the other room in the same flat, so they could talk over the screen again, because they couldn't talk to a real, talking to the real human being was not as exciting as falling in love with the image on the screen. Okay. So this kind of thing I consider so sad, because really, when you look at it, all of us want connection with other human beings, and we all find meaning in our lives based on our relationships with human beings, not with machines, not with screens. Machines and screens may facilitate communication, but we want to connect with real human beings. So I think we need to think about this whole technology thing and our fascination with it and how it's being used. Especially, you have all the sci-fi writers, and it's good that they're talking about this, because this is kind of in some ways where things are directed, or where they're going, where you have a machine that is so, a computer that is so programmed and so quote, quote, knowledgeable that maybe it can make international policy decisions for a country. It can decide whether you go to war. It can, the computer alone can make trade agreements or break trade agreements, and so people are this, wasn't that exciting? We can make a human being out of a computer. Yeah, except a computer doesn't feel, it doesn't have emotions. Okay. And if we start being governed by computers that don't have emotions, that are programmed by people who don't think very clearly and who don't have a sense of ethics, we're going to be in big trouble as a world, actually, as a society. Okay, so that's talking a little bit about technology and how I think, compassion and ethical conduct are really important in that. Let's go to science now. Okay, so the first thing, when Laura suggested this topic, the first thing that popped into my mind was the development of the bomb. Okay, because that was a major turning point, I think, in our civilization, when we created, due to scientific, wisdom, or I don't know, wisdom, scientific knowledge, the ability to destroy ourselves as living beings, as a as civilizations, as a global community. Yeah. And so I've often wondered, the scientists, who were engaged by the US government to develop the bomb. Okay. So first of all, the government wanted to develop it for use against the Nazis, but the Nazis actually surrendered before the bomb was made. Okay. So they never got to use it. Conventional warfare, which was bad enough, stopped the war in Europe. But I'm sure that the scientists, given, funded by the government, and the purpose of the government was, to use against America's enemies. And in regular ethical, or should I say the regular way society functions, people think that it is ethical to kill your enemy. Yeah. I mean, societies from time without beginning have been fighting and quarreling with each other, and people who are soldiers are well respected and glorified for their bravery, and it's considered heroic to kill your enemy. Yeah, we see that throughout, all human history. But this is something I question. Yeah, I question very deeply, and I'm sure a lot of people would get very upset with me if I said this in public, like I'm doing right now. That, I don't consider that noble and desirable at all. Okay, I think when I look around at the result of warfare, I don't see anything good that comes out of it. Yeah, perhaps my view comes because I grew up during the Vietnam War, and where we were told that we are going to kill people in order to live in peace. And where I watched my friends and classmates go to war. Some of them came back with PTSD. Some of them came back in body bags. You know, so my view may come from that, but I think it's not only having grown up in that climate. In any case, when I think about the scientists who developed the bomb, there must have been so much excitement on their part, just like the tech people were excited about, we're going to, invent something new. And okay, the government is going to use it for warfare, but, maybe it can be used for peaceful means too, like nuclear power plants and things like that. And the scientists were probably these people are intelligent within their own field and so excited about having the opportunity to really see, can we split the atom? Can we, do this and create some new kind of energy and change warfare and make America, so that nobody else will harm us because we have this weapon. And, they probably started out really excited with what they could do, but did they stop and think about how the bomb would change the world? Yeah. And how nuclear power in general would change the world. I doubt if anybody ever thought that that a tsunami would destroy or severely damage a nuclear plant in Japan, releasing all sorts of radioactivity into the environment and killing many people. I doubt that the scientists thought that, the wonderful thing they were inventing would lead to that. Yeah. But again, I think this is the thing of people being so excited with the newness and this feeling of, we human beings can build something wonderful and great, but without thinking of the ramifications of it. Yeah. And then seeing how it was used, there's still so much discussion. There's people saying that they think that the US dropping the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was very good because it stopped the war. It didn't stop it immediately. They had to bomb Nagasaki too. The Japanese didn't surrender after the first bomb. It took 2 bombs. So how many people lost their lives in horrific ways because of that? And did they think about that? How did those scientists feel when they saw the pictures of what those cities looked like? I don't know. Does anybody know? Did the US government ever publish pictures of what Hiroshima and Nagasaki looked like, of what the bodies of the people who were scorched, what they looked like? I don't remember seeing anybody. Do any of you? Yeah, you do? Okay. So, this is something that really needs to be thought about. How is the technology going to be used? Yeah. So I remember one time also talking with one of my teachers, Geshe Sonam Rinchen, for any of you who may know him. And I was with his translator and I were friends. And we were asking, did the people who create the bomb, what kind of karma did they create? What was what they did virtuous or non-virtuous? And my friend and I had more of a feeling that the scientists should be held responsible, at least karmically, if not in society, for how their invention was used, in the sense that, did they think that it could be misused? Did they think that it could cause so much harm? of course, it's the government who's responsible for the bombing, not the scientists. But when you start something in motion, think about how it's going to turn out many, many years from now. Yeah. And how it influenced society. Just even knowing that, how many countries now have nuclear weapons. Yeah. And looking at governments that may not be so stable, and leaders of governments who are not so stable having access to weapons of mass destruction like this. Yeah. Did the scientists consider that might happen? If they did, would they have still engaged in that kind of research? I wonder if there were scientists who were thrilled by the idea, but who brought ethical conduct and compassion into their thoughts and decided not to take part in the development of the bomb. Yeah, I wonder if there were people like that. It would be nice to hear from them. But also how the scientists felt after they saw how the bomb, after they saw how their research was used, and what the effect on humanity was. I found one recording on the web of Robert Oppenheimer just reflecting a little bit on what happened. And he, you can find it, it was a video thing, so you can find it. Watching his face and hearing his voice was very moving for me, because it said much more to me about how he felt than even the words he said. So I'll read you the words, but it's not the same as if you hear him saying it. So this was said later, I don't know how much later after it. So Oppenheimer said, "We knew the world would not be the same. A few people laughed, a few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, 'Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.' I suppose we all thought that way, that one way or another." So, he's saying what he thinks of the Trinity Project and Los Alamos. It shows that he thinks everybody had some awareness of what they were doing. But I wonder if they talked about it at that time. And I wonder if it was only later, after the bomb was used, that he had that kind of thought, or how much they really thought about it when they were doing the research. Later, Kenneth Bainbridge, who was the director of the Trinity Project. The Trinity Project was when they first tested the bomb in, I think it was New Mexico. Yeah. And he said, he was the one who planned and organized the Trinity text. And he said, "Now we are all sons of bitches." Okay. So after that, there was somebody called Lamont who wrote a book about the whole project that contained many, many errors in it. Okay. And so Bainbridge, was trying to correct some of these. And so apparently he wrote to Oppenheimer and said he wanted to explain his comment that now we are all sons of bitches, to make sure that Oppenheimer understood he was not trying to be offensive. But if Oppenheimer really felt what he said in the previous quote I read, he wouldn't have been offended. Okay, so here's what Bainbridge, the director of the project, said to Oppenheimer. The reasons for my statement were complex, but two predominated. I was saying, in effect, that we had all worked hard to complete a weapon which would shorten the war, but posterity would not consider that phase of it and would judge the effort as the creation of an unspeakable weapon by unfeeling people. That's how he thought people in the future like us would look at them. I was also saying that the weapon was terrible, and those who contributed to its development must share in any condemnation of it. Those who object to the language certainly could not have lived at Trinity for any length of time. Okay, so the person who wrote this on their blog, he shared some thoughts. And he said, I have been thinking about how broadly one might want to express the we in what Bainbridge said. Okay, those scientists who make bombs possible, was that the we he was referring to? Okay, yeah, or all of the 500,000 people involved in making the bomb, whether they knew their role in it or not. The United States government and population from Roosevelt on down. Who is the we that he's talking about? The Germans, the fear of whom inspired this initial creation. The world as a whole in the 1940s. Humanity as a whole ever. And then the person in the blog wrote, are we all sons of bitches because we as a species of sentient, intelligent, brilliant creatures have created such terrible means of doing violence to ourselves to the extremes of potential extinction? This may not be what Bainbridge meant, but it is an interesting road to go down. Yeah, for us to all think how much we are responsible. Many of us were not alive at the time they developed it, but now we're alive and we have, some say so regarding how nuclear weapons are used, in the sense that we vote for our leaders, at least if you don't live in Georgia. Yeah. So, it's a question to think about, and for whatever career you're in, think long term. Okay. So that's something about science and physics. Let's go to medicine now. Yeah. There's so many new things happening in medicine. But again, do we think about long term what they're going to bring? And we can just look even now. On one hand, it's so wonderful that there are ventilators and all, and there's ways to do CPR and drugs to give to people who just had heart attacks so that they don't die right then and there. And there's so many medical advancements. And yet at the same time, it's created a lot of ethical conundrums for people. We, at the monastery, people often write us when they have family problems and medical problems and so on and so forth. So we hear a lot of different things. And it's really agonizing for families when their relatives are on life support and they're in a coma and they don't come out of a coma quickly. When people come out of the coma quickly, or within a week or whatever, people are saying, wow, wonderful technology. This is fantastic. They would have died and now they're still alive. On the other hand, some people come out and their quality of life is horrible afterwards. And some people, like Terry Schiavo, remember, who was on life support, I don't know how long, and it was torture for her husband and her family. And then they had all these legal problems because the husband thought that she would want the plug pulled, and the parents refused, So then they're quarreling. So when we develop these kinds of things, do we think long-term about what kind of problems they could bring? Yeah. The whole thing of cloning, I find so interesting that, again, there's this thing in science like, wow, we can clone. And then there's this whole other body that is genetically related to me, so that if I need an organ transplant, I can get it from this other body. But wait a minute, doesn't that other body have a consciousness attached to it? Isn't that other body that you cloned a sentient being who feels happiness and suffering? Do you have the right, just because you gave a few of your cells to clone that person, to demand that they then give you their organs? Yeah. There's so many things that come up that really are of ethical concern. But do people who are enthralled with cloning think about that kind of stuff? Okay. And just medical ethics in general. And, again, I think that especially, in medical fields, that they really need to have not just one ethical course, but many, because doctors are put in very difficult situations with all the technology. And, now you have this whole thing of people who are hospitalists. So you're in the hospital, and a hospitalist who is a specialist in dealing with people who are in the hospital is the person that takes care of you. Your usual doctor is out of the picture. So you meet the doctor that takes care of you when you are in the hospital lying in the bed, and often very important decisions need to be made. And the hospitalist is coming in cold to speak with a family that's in crisis when, a loved one is on life support, or they're faced with a terminal illness, or, dementia or whatever. And these doctors, I really feel for them. I wouldn't want to come into a family situation and have to help people make life and death decisions. But that's kind of what it's like. And actually, in a way, having just said that, I realized that many of the people who contact us because they want advice on how to deal with this, they're using our advice to make life and death decisions. But I'm quite careful with those situations. And here we never tell people what to do. We give them things to think about. Yeah. We give them tools to deal with their own emotions, but we never tell them what to do. But when you're a doctor, and you have all the information and the family wants to know what are the likely outcomes of this treatment or that treatment, yeah, they're really going to be listening to the doctor. And, do you know to ask the doctor, if this were your mother or your father, what would you do? Yeah, because what they tell patients is maybe very different than what they would do for their own family. Okay. So that must be incredibly different or difficult for doctors. So, again, lots of things to think about with medical advancements. The whole thing of, now the whole idea of designer babies, yeah, taking certain genes from this person and certain genes from that person and creating your own designer baby. And what I think is so strange about this is not just that people think that they can create life, which is strange enough, but that people think that genes are the root of what a human being is, and that your genes determine everything about what kind of person you are. I respect science and value it, but I think dealing with the mind is very different than dealing with the body, and that the body and mind influence each other. They're associated when we're alive, but consciousness is something very special. When we talk about human beings, what we're really the thing we're mostly referring to is the fact that they're living, that they have consciousness associated with the body. Okay. If it's a dead body, we don't really say that's a living being. Yeah. We may sometimes refer to it as, that's Herman, but it's not, it's Herman's corpse. So does everything, every decision, every personality trait depend on what's, going on in your brain, the chemicals in your brain, the kind of, which synapses are flashing? Yeah. Is that what a personality is? It can be all reduced down to synapses and dopamine and serotonin and these kinds of things. I don't think so. Yeah. And yet, there's this thing in medical science of, maybe we can create life, and, we can design babies who are going to have certain qualities. And I think I don't think that's based on an accurate view of what life is, because society has really gone into the thing of physical, science is based on investigating external physical objects. Yeah. When you talk about who a person is, happiness and suffering, you're not talking about chemicals. Yeah. You're talking about human beings who have feelings. And that's different. Yeah. I was once at one of I attended a few of the Mind and Life conferences that His Holiness the Dalai Lama had with scientists. And there was one in 1989, right before His Holiness won the Nobel Peace Prize. And there were a couple of scientists who were participating in it who were very much reductionists, you know, and whenever His Holiness mentioned something about, you know, how the human mind works, they wanted to know what's the proof, because proof for them meant what's going on in the brain and what's going on in the body, and nothing else was proof. And so some of us afterwards, we were joking, you know, we wondered what this guy's wife, what their marriage was like. If when she said to him, honey, I love you, if he said, wait a minute, I'm going to put some electrodes on and see what's going on in your brain to see if you really love me or if you're just saying it. Yeah. So kind of, you know, I mean, can you imagine human relationships degenerating to that kind of thing where you have to really test, you know, the synapses to see if somebody's telling you the truth about their feelings? It's so kind of weird, you know? Yeah, and you know, I have a lot of discomfort when you know, people say that, you know, there's a correlation with certain genes and alcoholism, for example. Okay, so correlation is different than cause. Okay, first of all, they don't mean that one causes the other. It just means there happens to be a correlation. Second, I wonder how broadly researched that is, to say that there's a correlation with certain genes and alcoholism. But third, the thing that really disturbs me is how many people are thinking, my parents were alcoholics, and that is going to doom me to be an alcoholic because I inherited their genes. And when people think like that, yeah, when you start thinking, oh, you know, I'm going to become an alcoholic because it's in my genes, there's going to become it's going to be much more likely that you will become an alcoholic because you're already priming yourself by saying that to yourself. Okay. And when they start saying certain genes are correlated with certain crimes, that's really a bag of worms. Does that mean that now, when we're going to test all the babies for their genes, and if you have a certain gene when you're an infant that correlates with the gene of people who are mass murderers or rapists or whatever, then, you know, is society going to want to kill you when you're a baby so that you don't grow up and because society thinks you will become a murderer or a rapist? Yeah, it brings up these kinds of really touchy questions. And, you know, then when people, you know, think, oh, well, we're scientists and we know and we're sure this is how somebody's going to grow up, then I can imagine, you know, there'd be a clamor from certain people who don't have those genes, who say, well, for sure, those people are going to turn out to be criminals. We should, you know, extinguish them now. And, you know, then you're going into the kind of thing that Hitler was advocating. Yeah, destroying people who society thinks don't fit in. Yeah, that is dangerous. And also, I personally don't think that those qualities are necessary, are even passed down in the genes. You know, they talk about nature and nurture. I think nurture is much more important. And also, being a Buddhist, we put another element in there. It's not just, you know, the nature, your biological and chromosomal things. And it's not just nurture, your conditioning in this life. As Buddhists, we talk about karma. and the actions people did in previous lives that influence who they become in this life, why we are born the people we're born as, why we have different habits and tendencies. Yeah. And so as Buddhists, we think, that these actions that we did, including thoughts, words, deeds, in previous lives, influence who we are now. Yeah. So to just start, dismissing people because of their chromosomes or their genes, would be something that I would consider really reprehensible. It's not even giving anybody a chance in their life. Okay, so that's a few things we touched on. We started out with technology, we went to the bomb, we ended up with medical science. There's a whole lot more to say, but I wanted to leave some time now for questions or discussion or whatever. And so before you ask anything, I'm going to say on this kind of topic, I will be basically presenting my ideas, or Buddhist ideas. So, yeah, that's for the perspective that I'm coming from, and I don't pretend to be a scientist or a technology expert or a doctor. Okay, so it's open for you to ask or to comment or whatever.
Well, I do have a question. You were saying that developers should be thinking of how their ideas can be used in the future, but how can you be responsible for how other people are going to use or misuse your technology?
Yeah, that's the difficult thing, isn't it? Once you invent something, especially if the government's funding it, it is now out of your hands, and you can't control how other people use it. So then it comes back to the thing of, if you can't control, then maybe you have to think beforehand how it could be used, and maybe not develop it to the point where other people who have different value systems or who are unscrupulous can take control and use what you've created.
Yeah, but I'm saying, if I develop something, how can I be responsible if a child pornographer or some hacker is going to try and steal someone's money? I mean, I'm developing something that's good, but it can always be misused. And even as foreseeable, do you say, then don't do it, even though it's good for the majority?
Yeah, it's difficult. I'm not saying that you would hold the person who invented it or designed it responsible, certainly not in a legal way or in an ethical way, because the people, who misuse the technology, they're the ones who are responsible for the harm they do. But what I'm saying is, as somebody who's creating things, it's important to think long term and consider maybe how things could be misused, so that you can prevent harm, before it happens. Okay, I mean, it's the kind of thing like, okay, people buy guns, another hot issue. Okay, so people buy guns. Their motivation is, I want to protect myself and I want to protect my family. Okay. They leave the guns in the house. Their children know where the things are, but they tell their children, don't touch any of these things and just leave it alone, and like that. Okay. And I remember reading one article about, a family like this. The son was dating one girl. They didn't have a really good relationship. They got really emotional one day. They were quarreling. the son took out the rifle, and threatened the girlfriend with it. And, it was a teenage drama kind of thing. And he wound up shooting her. Now, if the parents, and this is the whole thing with guns, is if you own a gun, you are more likely to be killed with a gun, statistics show, than if you don't own one. Yeah. And, the accidental shootings. So, if people think beforehand, oh, this looks good, but in the long term, how can it be misused? Yeah. Another example, there in a town about 45 minutes away from where we live, in a Target, I think it was, a Target store, there was a mother who was shopping. She had her toddler in the cart. She had her purse there. She had a gun in the purse. It was supposed to be a purse that toddlers could not open, probably sold by the NRA. Anyway, her toddler opened the purse, picked up the gun. The kid probably didn't know what in the world he was doing and killed his mother. The gun went off, the mother died. And I'm thinking, not only the mother's dead, the child grows up without a mother, but the child his whole life is going to have this on his head, that he killed his mother, even though he was just a baby. If the parents had thought about it beforehand, maybe they wouldn't have bought the gun. Or maybe the mother wouldn't have taken it to the store or whatever, So what I'm saying is, think before, think in advance and bring your ethics into how you think about things in advance, and bring compassion into how you think about things in advance. Even though, like you pointed out, once it's out of your hands, you can't control how other people use it. Maybe you can control who has access to it. Yeah. So you can, if you're, you can, I don't know how it operates with all the licensing of different things, but I imagine there must be some way, if you invent something, that you can control who has access.
Okay, so I have a question. I'm a scientist and I grapple with this one all the time. And the question is, how do you think about research involving animals? They're sentient beings, they'll suffer when you use them for medical research, but sometimes we have well-defined things that we think we can learn that will benefit people later on if this research is done.
This is really difficult. It's really difficult. And I don't think I can give a really satisfactory answer on it, because it causes harm to the animals. In the long run, it may benefit human beings. When you talk about, from a Buddhist perspective, about karma, causing harm deliberately is not a good thing. On the other hand, if your motivation is in the end that you have regret for harming the animals, but your long-term motivation is to be of benefit to other beings whose lives can possibly be saved by what you're researching, then that really mitigates it a lot, because there is some good intention involved. But it's difficult. And I think, people as individuals will have to think about that and think about their motivation. And, if you think, okay, this will bring about some good in the long term, then keep renewing that motivation as much as possible and try and cause as little pain and suffering to the animals as possible, and use as few animals for experimentation as possible. Or some people may decide, I'm not even going to go in that direction where I have to do that kind of research. So it's a difficult one. It's difficult.
I teach a lot of the subjects that you talked about tonight in my ethics class, and they are deeply difficult topics to talk about.
Yeah.
The question that is in the chat box is, in the US, there's a lot of talk about the need for updated internet regulations. Do you think that the US government or self-governing organizations are more likely to bring about an ethical outcome?
That's not something where I think I have enough information where I could give a wise opinion. I don't know so much about how the US government would regulate it, how the companies themselves would regulate it. I can say that I was very pleased when Facebook and Twitter stopped some of the accounts where there was a lot of misinformation coming out, where they just took it upon themselves, whether the government regulates or not, to say, you know, this is our platform. We developed it. We don't want it to be used to spread misinformation that causes anger, that causes quarrels, that incites people to violence. So I was very glad to see some of the companies take it in their own hands and ban certain accounts. I think that was quite good. In terms of long-term regulation, like I said, I don't think I have enough of an idea of how that whole thing works to comment on that. Maybe the person who asked the question, they probably are in it, and maybe they have some more information and would like to share their idea.
Oh, she's in a noisy place and cannot answer that. Okay, well, if there's more chat, then I will bring that up.
Well, thank you very much for the talk, Laura, and certainly venerable children. It looks like my internet is a little bit spotty, so hopefully this will come through clearly. I am a dad of 2 preschool-aged children, and so I know that the pandemic has impacted their sense of connection in sort of, you know, their understanding of their grandparents and their extended family has all been through technology. And so I also see how, you know, sort of projecting that into the future, how they're just 2 humans in an entire global generation that are going to have to somehow create a connection with one another, you know, in a time where it's just completely digital. So I see that, you know, on one hand, technology is a challenge. On the other hand, I do work in the tech space here in Santa Monica, so I'm in California. And I'm curious, maybe as kind of a follow-up to that previous question, are there specific sort of aspects of the scriptures or potentially Buddhist teachings that are sort of uniquely positioned to help understand how to use technology, either from a technologist perspective on how to build human-centered technology, or as a consumer? Like, you know, is the, you know, the Eightfold Path something that you would point to? How do you think about that?
Yeah, well, clearly they didn't have what we take as technology at the Buddhist time, although they had their own form of technology. You know, there were tools and implements and things like that. The Buddha always emphasized this thing of thinking big and thinking in the long term, not just how something will affect me, not how I can make money from it, how I can become famous because of it, how I can have power over other people about it. But the Buddha always taught about the disadvantages actually of that kind of self-centered thought and the advantages of cherishing others. Because the real key to a harmonious society, which is what we want, is all of us cultivating an internal attitude that cherishes other living beings. Yeah. So it doesn't matter your religion or your philosophy or whatever. This is just basic human goodness. And yet it's very difficult. And especially in a society where we are raised to be individuals and stand out and be famous and be known and all this kind of stuff. But that was a real key value of really thinking about the good for the whole. Yeah. And then in terms of what to abandon and what to practice in a more detailed way, the Buddha set out 10 actions to abandon and 10 actions, actually 16 actions to practice. So to abandon, is killing, and then the one to practice is preserving life. Yeah. To abandon taking what is not freely given to us. So sometimes it's translated as stealing, but we think of stealing as, the guy who breaks in your house. This one, taking what isn't freely given, includes all the white collar crimes and borrowing things and not returning them, cooking the books of an organization, not paying fees and taxes that you're supposed to pay. So it really encompasses a lot. The third one is to abandon unkind and unwise sexual behavior. Yeah. And we can see that, that is the source of so many marital problems. Yeah. And so many problems, with child abuse. Yeah. And so those are 3 actions that are done physically. Then there's 4 verbally. So to correlate those with the ones that we should practice, instead of killing, to do whatever we can to preserve life. Yeah. Instead of taking what hasn't been given, to respect others' property and do what we can to protect other people's property. Instead of using sexuality in an unkind or an unwise way, to use it in a loving way. Okay, so those are the 3 physical ones. Then the 4 verbal ones, to abandon lying, okay, and to tell the truth. And this one is so important. I mean, first, our parents taught it to us, but when we look at what is happening in society now, where lies are being taken as truth, yeah, and where the Capitol was there was an insurrection at the Capitol because of lies, people being tricked and believing in lies. You really see it's quite a serious thing that could destroy, like I was saying, destroy democracy, really harm our society. Yeah. So to tell the truth and be honest in that way, it's so important. The second verbal one is to abandon divisive speech. So that's the kind of speech that creates conflict between people. And as we can see, Twitter, Facebook, so many people misuse these things to create conflict and to get people to quarrel. Yeah. And to separate people, keep them from being harmonious. The third verbal one is harsh words. And again, technology is really involved with that. Going from little kids who defriend their friend and then their friend is upset. And, we've heard stories of teenagers killing themselves because of what somebody else said about them on Facebook or somebody defriending them. You know, again, watching what's happening in our political world because of the use of technology, where, you know, and people trolling each other, where, you know, we're in a way where if you're angry, you can just dump your anger on whoever you want and remain anonymous. And that's wrong. I mean, if we're angry, we need to find other ways of dealing with it. But to then think that you can, you know, destroy somebody else's reputation or make them so miserable from what you're posting online, and you aren't even showing your real name. I mean, that's bad. Okay. So, you know, these are all things of, you know, speaking truthfully, using our speech to unite people. Yeah. To share wisdom, to help people become better people. Using our speech instead of, you know, insulting people, criticizing them, trashing them, to use our speech to encourage people. Yeah. To point out their good qualities, to encourage harmony, to learn how to speak at the right time, in the right way, instead of just, well, I have an opinion, so bleh, you know, and you just throw it out there and you don't care how it affects other people. But, you know, sensitivity, the whole point is our actions matter. What we do matters. It affects other living beings. And we have to become more aware of that and not let the anonymousness that you know, technology provides us as an excuse to think that what we say and do does not matter, and that we're free to dump on others whatever we please. Our actions do matter very much, even small actions. Yeah. And then the fourth verbal one is to abandon idle talk. Just blah, 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 blah. Okay, which we see a lot of on, you know, even you try to watch the news now, the news is mixed up with entertainment and everybody's blah, blah, blahing and like that. And we just waste a lot of time that way. Then so this is, you know, the counter to that is to develop a sensitivity about what to say to whom and at what time and how to say things. Yeah, how to create harmony, how to bring out other people's goodness. Because sometimes I feel that other people, they're like pianos. Yeah, a piano, you could either go like this, like you do when you're 4 years old and you make a horrible sound, or you can play something that's beautiful. With our speech, you know, we can encourage so much goodness and happiness and self-confidence and feelings of worthiness, you know, and affection in other people if we use our speech properly, or we can really damage them. Yeah. And it matters. What we say matters. Then the three verbal ones are coveting things. So the opposite to that would be being generous, practicing generosity. Yeah. Malice and plotting how to get our revenge. You know, again, big problem in society. And, you know, how are people using Twitter and all these other things now, the new platforms that have come up to plot how to harm other people, you know, with the white nationalist groups and these kinds of things. So again, you know, being careful about that. And then the last one is wrong views, which would be thinking like like I was just saying, like my actions don't matter. I can just dump whatever I want to say out on other people. It's their problem. That's a wrong view. We can't live life like that. Or thinking, there's no good, there's no bad, it's all nothing. Yeah, very nihilistic way of thinking. So, as a father of two little ones, you want to really, you love your kids. You want to teach them good values. You want to teach them how to be kind and wise human beings who care about others. So, this is something for all of us, whether we're children or adults, that we need to practice. But I think especially parents, because my mom used to say, do what I say, but not what I do. But kids are smart and they watch what their parents do. Yeah. And so as parents, if you want to, your kids to grow up to be good human beings, then you have to model that for them. Let's just take a minute before we close and just sit and rejoice at what we talked about tonight. Yeah. Rejoice at the positive energy that we created by thinking about these kinds of really difficult topics. And the goodness that comes out of us, that comes as a result of each of us as individuals, hopefully taking what we've heard tonight and really thinking more about it and using it to become wiser in our ethical conduct and to become more kinder and more compassionate human beings. So let's just have a feeling of rejoicing at what we've done together. And then to send all of that, imagine sending all of that good energy out into the universe with our aspirations that it benefits every living being, that it brings kindness and hope and optimism and peace to every living being. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you everyone for attending, and it was a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, thank you all for attending. I really appreciated it.